The wind screamed past Leo Vance's ears at 120 miles per hour, but it wasn't loud enough to drown out the crackle of 12 killing curses tearing through the clouds behind him. He was 4,000 feet above the astronomy tower, alone, flying a splintered Comet 260 that vibrated so violently his hands were already numb to the bone. Below him, the Hogwarts protective wards were flickering like a dying candle, buckling under the bombardment of the aerial squad chasing him. There were 12 of them, 12 elite Death Eaters on Nimbus racing brooms, forming a perfect, tightening noose around one seventh-year Gryffindor who had failed his defense against the dark arts OWL twice. Leo checked his altitude, he checked the distance to the enemy leader, and he checked his own body, counting 3 broken ribs from the bludger hit earlier and a wand arm that was shaking uncontrollably. He had no support. The rest of the school's aerial defenders were scattered or grounded. If Leo didn't break this formation in the next 60 seconds, the squad would reach the optimum range to bombard the Great Hall, where half the younger students were sheltering. He didn't have the speed to outrun them. He didn't have the magical power to duel them. He only had one option left. A suicidal, half-baked piece of magic he had found in a banned book on dragon handling, a spell so dangerous that Professor Flitwick had threatened to expel him just for asking about the theory. It was a compression charm, meant to shield dragon keepers from falling debris, but Leo had spent the last 6 months turning it into a weapon. If you want to know how this forgotten wizard turned a useless spell into Hogwarts' last defense, stay with me until the end of this story. Leo Vance was never the hero Hogwarts expected. He wasn't a prefect, he wasn't a Quidditch captain, and he certainly wasn't a member of Dumbledore's army. He was the boy you saw in detention for trying to modify his broom with illegal charms to make it go faster. The student who spent more time in the hospital wing for self-inflicted spell damage than for actual dueling injuries. The professors called him reckless. His housemates called him a liability. During the war, while others were mastering shield charms and counter curses, Leo was obsessed with velocity. He believed that speed was the only armor that mattered. But now, in the freezing darkness of November, speed wasn't enough. The Death Eaters were organized. They weren't just chasing him, they were herding him. They pushed him higher and higher into the thin air, where the oxygen was scarce, and his broom's tail twigs began to freeze and snap. He pulled the handle up, forcing the groaning comet into a vertical climb. Green light sizzled past his left ankle, singeing the fabric of his trousers. He was exhausted. His magical core felt scraped hollow. He had spent the last 20 minutes acting as a decoy, leading this squad away from the castle, but they had realized the trick. The leader, a masked figure on a sleek black broom, signaled the others. They broke formation, spreading out into a terrifying, killing ring, a circle of 12 wands pointing inward, trapping Leo in the center. They were done playing. They were charging a combined bombardment curse, a spell designed to pulverize stone and bone alike.
Leo watched the tips of their wands glow with a sickly purple light. He had 10 seconds before they fired. He could try to dive, but a standard dive would just make him an easier target. He needed to fall faster than they could track. He needed to fall faster than gravity allowed. 6 months ago, Leo had been sitting in the back of the library, reading a dusty manual on Hungarian horntail containment. He had found a spell called the Kinetic Sheath.
It was designed to create a pressurized cushion of air around a wizard falling from a dragon's back, a safety bubble to soften the impact. But Leo, with his obsession for mechanics, saw something else. If you inverted the wand movement and removed the braking component, the spell didn't cushion the air, it compressed it. It took the air in front of you and packed it into a solid cone of pressure. If you cast it while stationary, it did nothing. But if you cast it while diving at terminal velocity, the physics changed. The air wouldn't move out of the way, it would become a battering ram. The first time he tested the wand movement in the dorms, he blew out 3 windows and knocked himself unconscious for 2 hours. His friends laughed. They called it the pancake charm, convinced he would just flatten himself against the ground. They didn't understand that Leo wasn't trying to land safely. He was trying to become a missile. Back in the sky. The purple light on the Death Eater's wands intensified. The air crackled with static. Leo looked down. The clouds had parted, revealing the distant dark shape of the castle far below. The center of the enemy ring was empty space. If he stayed here, he died. If he tried to fly through them, he died. Leo gripped his wand, his knuckles white. He shifted his grip on the broom, moving his hands to the very center of the shaft, a position that offered 0 control but maximum aerodynamics. He took a breath of the thin, freezing air, tasting the ozone of dark magic. He didn't think about glory. He didn't think about the war. He just thought about the math. Mass times acceleration equals force. And he was about to generate a lot of force. If this forgotten legend of Hogwarts is already touching your heart and you'd like to help keep these stories alive, you can support the channel by clicking the thanks button below the video. Every little bit helps me continue bringing you more hidden tales of courage and magic. The lead Death Eater shouted the command, "Fire!" Leo didn't wait, he didn't bank, he didn't spiral. He simply kicked the tail of his broom upward and threw his entire body weight forward, snapping the comet into a 90-degree nosedive straight down. For a split second, he was falling through the center of the ring, the curses converging on the spot where he had been a heartbeat ago. The purple beams collided with a deafening crack, exploding in a shockwave of magic that singed the back of his neck, but he was already gone. He was plummeting. Gravity grabbed him and yanked him down. The wind roared, transforming from a scream into a solid wall of noise. Leo narrowed his eyes against the stinging cold. He pointed his wand directly over the nose of his broom, aiming at nothing but the empty air rushing up to meet him. "Sina Theca Maxima!" he screamed, the incantation ripping out of his throat. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. The air in front of his broom didn't part, it hardened. The spell scooped up the atmosphere and crushed it into a visible, shimmering cone of distorted light around him. The pressure against his body was immense. His ears popped painfully. His vision blurred at the edges. He wasn't just falling anymore. The spell was sucking him downward, creating a vacuum that accelerated him beyond the natural limits of a freefall. He was a stone dropped in a well, but the well was magic. Above him, the Death Eaters realized their mistake. They saw the Gryffindor plummeting, not to escape, but to attack. They dove after him, 12 streaks of black smoke chasing a single golden blur. They were faster on the straightaways, their brooms superior in every way, and they began to close the distance. They thought he was running. They didn't see the shock cone building around him. They didn't know that the air pressure around Leo was now reaching critical mass. 2,000 feet. The leader was right on his tail, wand raised for a killing curse. The others were flanking, tightening the noose again. Leo could feel the compression spell vibrating in his wand arm, a trembling instability that threatened to shatter his bones. He had to hold it. If he released the spell now, the backlash would tear him apart. He had to wait until they were close enough. He had to wait until they were all inside the blast radius. 1,000 feet. The ground was rushing up, a dark quilt of treetops and stone. The Death Eaters were confident now. They were within range. The leader laughed, a sound snatched away by the wind. Leo saw the green light gathering at the tip of the enemy wand in his peripheral vision. He gritted his teeth, blood trickling from his nose as the G-forces hammered him. "Now," he whispered. Leo didn't fire a curse at them. He didn't try to dodge. He simply cancelled the spell. He broke the magical containment field that was holding the compressed air together. The physics of the situation resolved itself in a fraction of a second. The cone of super-compressed air suddenly released from its magical binding while traveling at over 200 miles per hour, detonated. It wasn't an explosion of fire, but of pure kinetic force. A transparent sphere of shockwave erupted outward from Leo's position. It hit the pursuing Death Eaters like a physical hammer. The leader's broom snapped instantly, the wood shattering into toothpicks under the stress. The other 11 attackers were hurled violently sideways, their formations broken, their flight paths uncontrollably altered by the wall of air that slammed into them. Robes tore, wards shattered. Men were tossed like rag dolls against the unyielding sky. The concussive blast cleared the clouds for a mile in every direction, a thunderclap that rattled the windows of the great hall below. Leo was in the eye of the storm. The recoil of the blast slowed his descent just enough to keep him from dying instantly, but the forces involved were too much for his old comet. The handle splintered in his grip. The tail twigs disintegrated. He was no longer flying, he was falling with debris. He had 4 seconds of consciousness left. He saw the sky above him clear, no black trails, no purple curses, just the cold, indifferent stars. He had done it. He had cleared the air.
He hit the soft earth of the Quidditch pitch mud at a speed that would have killed him if not for the residual cushion of the blast wave and a desperate last-second cushioning charm from a professor on the ground. The world went black before he even stopped rolling. When Leo woke up, the war was still going on, but the room was quiet. He was in a bed in the infirmary, his body encased in stiff bandages and smelling of skelegro. He tried to move, and a sharp pain in his ribs reminded him that he was alive.
Madame Pomfrey was there, adjusting the potion bottle, looking more severe than usual. There were no medals on his bedside table. There was no crowd of cheering students. The battle had moved on, the incident in the sky recorded simply as an atmospheric anomaly that had disrupted enemy movements. But later that evening, a single visitor came to his bedside. It was the flight instructor, Madame Hooch. She didn't say a word at first. She just placed a new, polished broom handle at the foot of his bed. It wasn't a racing broom. It was a sturdy, heavy, clean-cut oak handle, the kind used for heavy lifting. She looked at him with a strange expression, somewhere between horror and respect. "That was the stupidest piece of flying I have ever seen, Mr. Vance," she whispered, her voice rough. "The spell you used is forbidden for a reason. You fractured your wand arm in 3 places and destroyed a piece of school property." She paused, looking out the window at the clear, star-filled sky. "But the astronomy tower is still standing, and 12 Death Eaters are currently being rounded up from the Forbidden Forest with severe vertigo and broken brooms. Good flying, Leo." She left him alone in the dark. Leo lay back, listening to the distant sounds of the castle settling for the night. He realized then that legends aren't always about the wizard who defeats the Dark Lord, or the witch who casts the perfect Patronus. Sometimes a legend is just a kid with a bad reputation, a cheap broom, and the courage to turn himself into a bullet when everyone else is out of ammunition. He had been mocked for his obsession with speed, for his suicidal experiments. But in that 4-second window above the clouds, those flaws had been the only thing that saved them. If this forgotten legend of Hogwarts touched your heart, tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Leo's place? Like the video, share it with another Harry Potter fan. Read the following story with a warm, deep, and whimsical British accent, similar to a classic fantasy audiobook narrator. And subscribe to hear more hidden stories of courage, magic, and impossible odds. Sometimes the only way to win a war is to fall faster than the enemy can think.